Night fell over the Montana range like a slow collapse of ash and ember. The wind crawled down from the peaks, dragging the cold across the pines and the frozen riverbed. Somewhere near the tree line, smoke rose from a small cabin half buried in snow, a lonely breath against the wilderness. Inside, Clara Hensley stirred a pot of stew. Her hands were rough, steady, used to silence. Her face, drawn by years of solitude, held the soft sadness of someone who had learned not to speak when the heart ached. The old rocking chair beside the window creaked once, though no one sat in it. She didn't turn to look. Some things, she'd learned, were better left unseen than a memory whispered in her ear as if carried by the draft through the floorboards. You ain't alone up here, Clara. Never will be. She smiled faintly. The stew simmered. Outside, snow thickened, soft and relentless, the kind that erased all tracks by morning. Down in the valley town of Alder Creek, folks were whispering again. They always did when the nights grew long. They said Clara Hensley talked to ghosts, that her husband's lantern still burned at her window years after he'd died. Some called her a witch. Others pitied her. Most just avoided the mountain altogether. But that night, 3 drifters warmed themselves by the saloon stove, hungry, broke, and desperate enough to listen. Jed Malcolm, lean and hollow-eyed, leaned forward when he heard talk of a widow woman living alone with food put away. Eli Pike, the youngest, barely a man, shifted uneasily. Ain't right robbing a woman, he muttered. Silas read. Harker grinned through his scarred jaw. Ain't much right about freezing neither. Jed spat into the fire. We'll take what we need. Ghosts or no ghosts. By the time the moon rose pale and sickly over the ridge, the 3 men were riding through the storm. The wind carved through their coats like knives. Branches snapped like gunfire in the dark. When at last they saw the faint light of a cabin, the horses balked, nostrils flaring. Something unseen moved among the trees, a shadow that didn't belong to them. Jed cursed under his breath. Keep moving. It's just the wind. They reached the door and kicked it open. Snow and night spilled into the room. Clara turned from the fire, her ladle frozen midair, her eyes calm and steady as still water. We ain't mean harm, Eli stammered, but Jed shoved him aside. Food. Fire. We'll be gone by dawn. Clara didn't flinch. She only nodded. Then sit. The fire's big enough for all. It was her calm that unnerved them most. No fear, no plea, just quiet grace. They sat, ate her stew, and thawed in her silence. The crackling fire threw long shadows along the log walls, and with each flicker, the cabin seemed to breathe as Red's eyes wandered. He saw the rocking chair, still moving slightly. A man's hat hung on the peg beside the door. A rifle leaned in the corner. So the stories were true, he sneered. Widow still keeps her man's things. Clara didn't answer. Her voice came soft as a sigh. He keeps mine too. A log burst in the fire. The smoke rose, twisting upward. For a moment, it took the shape of broad shoulders, a man's frame, then broke apart. Eli froze. Did you see that? Jed snapped. Just smoke, boy. Eat. But Clara's eyes flickered toward the empty chair. Don't anger the wind, she said quietly. The hours bled together. Outside, the storm clawed at the walls. Inside, the 3 men's laughter turned brittle, their hunger uneasy. When the horses cried out from the corral and fled into the dark, even Jed went still. The air felt charged, thick with something old and watching. Clara closed her eyes. You should not have come here tonight. Eli shivered. He couldn't name what he felt. Fear, yes, but also sorrow, like standing in a churchyard and realizing the graves were listening. Later, when Red and Jed finally slept, Eli stayed awake by the dying fire. Clara hummed a low tune, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Was it your husband? He asked quietly. She smiled, but her eyes stayed on the window. He died out there one winter, trying to bring me a lantern. Said he didn't want me sitting in the dark. They found the lantern still lit beside him. Eli's gaze drifted toward the chair, still rocking, slow and steady. You ain't afraid? He whispered. Clara shook her head. You can't fear what you love. Outside, the wind softened. The fire flickered low, painting her face in amber and shadow. Somewhere deep in the mountain, a long, low sound echoed. Not thunder, not quite voice. And the cabin seemed to listen. Eli closed his eyes, the hymn still trembling in her throat, following him into uneasy dreams. Morning came thin and pale, the kind that didn't promise warmth. The storm had eased, leaving the mountain draped in white silence. Smoke rose slow from the chimney, curling upward like prayer. Inside, Clara moved quietly, stacking wood by the stove, her breath misting in the air. The three men had survived the night, though something in them had shifted, as if the dark had taken its due. Red was the first to stir, muttering curses, his hands searching for something to steal. He pried open cupboards, found jars of preserves and a little coffee. His boots thudded heavy against the floorboards. "Woman's got plenty," he grunted, "and she lives up here like a queen." Clara didn't look up. Queens don't live in cabins. He snorted. "Maybe ghosts do." His boot struck something hollow under the rug. Curious, he bent and tore it aside, a trapdoor. Beneath, a small chest waited, its iron clasp dulled by years. That Jed's eyes gleamed. "Well now, look what the mountain's been hiding." Clara's tone went quiet, like the hush before a storm. "That belongs to him." Red laughed and kicked the latch open. Inside lay a man's folded coat, a broken pocket watch, and a faded photograph. Clara and her husband, Daniel, smiling under a summer sky. Red scoffed, disappointed. "Ain't nothing but dead man's junk." Then the cabin shuddered. A gust swept through, though every window was shut. The lamp flames stretched tall, then vanished. The air dropped cold enough for breath to show. The rifle fell from its peg, clattering to the floor. Jed stiffened. "Enough tricks, woman." But Eli's voice trembled, his eyes wide and wet. "It ain't her." The wind outside rose to a low whistle, slow, mournful, like a man calling home across the valley. Clara turned toward the window, her face pale but serene. "He's been waiting. He doesn't like trespassers." Red backed away, knuckles white around his knife. "You keepin' a ghost on a leash, lady?" She met his gaze with pity. "You can't keep what's already free." Her words seemed to stir something in the room. A long, slow creak. The rocking chair moved again, steady as a heartbeat. Eli saw it clearly this time. A man's outline, faint as smoke, rising from the chair. Broad shoulders, a tilt of the head, hands resting on the back of Clara's chair. The air thrummed with warmth and sorrow. Jed stepped back, pale beneath his beard. "What are you?" "Just a woman who loved too deep," she answered. Red swung his knife at the shape in the air. "To hell with this." Before his arm fell, the beam above him cracked, sharp and final. Wood splintered. Snow burst through the roof in a rush. Red stumbled backward into the chest. For an instant, Eli swore he heard a heartbeat echo from it. Steady, human, alive. Then silence. When the dust cleared, Red was gone. Only his knife lay on the floor, half buried in snow. Clara whispered. "He took the mean one first." Eli's hands shook as he helped her brace the broken door. Their eyes met, and in that quiet gaze, fear softened into something else. Two people clinging to gentleness while the world tore apart outside. She nodded once, a wordless thank you. Jed leaned against the wall, breathing hard, his hardness cracked wide open. "My woman died last winter," he said finally, voice rough with shame. "I left her in the cold and ran. Couldn't bear to see her gone." Clara's eyes shimmered in the dim light. "Then you know what love costs." The cabin grew still again. The wind outside shifted, no longer angry, just tired. Through the window, they saw a faint glow moving through the trees, a lantern swinging slow. A man's figure followed, blurred by mist, leading two horses back to the corral. Clara whispered, "He's offering mercy. Don't waste it." Jed stood frozen, jaw trembling, eyes glistening with something that looked like faith. Without a word, he stepped into the snow, his boots crunching softly. The mountain swallowed him whole, and the lantern's light followed until both disappeared into dawn. Eli stayed behind. He didn't ask to. He simply couldn't leave. There was something in Clara's quiet that steadied him, something that felt like a place to rest. Together they repaired the damage Red's fury had left behind. The days that followed passed slow, marked not by talk, but by small kindnesses. Her pouring him coffee, his chopping wood before she asked they tea night. The rocking chair still moved, but gently now, like it was keeping rhythm with the heartbeat of the house. The air no longer felt heavy. The mountain, once hostile, breathed with them. Sometimes, Clara would sit by the fire and whisper, "Thank you, Daniel." And the wind, soft and low, would answer through the chimney. not as a ghost, but as a memory finally at Peace Point one morning. As sunlight spilled over the peaks and melted the last of the snow, Eli stepped outside with her. He looked at the endless wilderness, wild, silent, alive, and said, "I think he's gone." Clara smiled faintly. "No, love like that never really goes. It just learns to rest." They stood together in the quiet dawn, two souls who had learned survival through grace, not strength. And if you asked anyone down in Alder Creek about the Mountain Widow, you'd hear different tales. Some said she took in a drifter who'd once been an outlaw. Others swore she still talked to her husband's ghost. But the old ones, the ones who'd lived long enough to know truth from fear, said she'd simply learned to live again. Maybe that's the real haunting of the mountains, not the dead, but the living who refuse to forget them. And so the story ends. The way all good Western tales do, not with vengeance, but with mercy. For sometimes, the dead don't linger to curse us. They stay behind to show us how to keep the light burning. Remember this, traveler, the old voice says as the fire fades. There ain't no cabin too cold for grace to find it. Mercy's just love that stayed behind, waiting for someone brave enough to open the door.